Over the years, I've made a number of videos covering the concept of geomaxing, or what's come to be called these days passport bros. The terms change, but it's basically the same game. And it's a bit of a dead horse to be beaten, but I think there's some salient points to be made every now and then that go beyond the conventional ones. But let's start with the conventional ones. One thing I've said forever is that women are women. Yes, there are cultural influences. Yes, these are factors. However, women are women. They evolved universal behavioral traits because those were the traits that worked out for them ultimately and allowed them to reproduce and allowed them to spread their DNA. And that's why the vast majority of women act like women. Whether they're Filipinas, Brazilians, Germans, Russians, Italians, Chinese, it doesn't matter. Women are women. I've been saying this for years, and for some reason, some people still think that this is not the case. Matter of fact, one of the catalysts for this video was a guy that I was talking to online from the United States in his late 20s, I think 28, 29, who was planning to do the passport bros thing, convinced that women in the U.S. were somehow rotten and spoiled, but elsewhere they were fundamentally different. And it's incredible to me, to this day, that some men, many men even, still believe this poppycock, that women in other cultural spheres and other countries are fundamentally different. They're completely different from the women at home. Sure, there's some cultural differences, but women are women. That is the most important thing you can ever understand about human behavior. Men are men, women are women, and the environment is at best a safeguard. The minute you remove her from that environment and put her in your own environment, it's GG, it's game over. You've seen this happen many times. You know the stories about guys bringing their Southeast Asian wives back to the United States or their Colombian wives back to the States, and you know what happens. It isn't pleasant. Another thing, which I've talked about several times that I need to convey again, that I've tried to convey to this young guy who wanted to leave the United States in search of, I don't know what you would term it, love, relationship, take your pick. Everything these days is pretty much oversaturated. Not just geomaxing passport bros. We'll get to that in a bit. But think about it. YouTube has become probably the most formulaic thing on planet Earth. If there's a topic, there are a bunch of videos covering it. And if you want to start a channel now, let's say, about X topic, if the topic's oversaturated, and most are, you're probably not going to make much of a splash. If you find something really niche like, I don't know, butterfly collecting or bird watching, maybe. But the point is earlier was always better on YouTube. If you had started a channel about whatever topic 8, 9, 10 years ago, you'd be better off now because you would have had the momentum. And on top of that, you would have enjoyed the first mover principle. The originals on YouTube, many of them are still around and doing well today, not because they were great or amazing, but because they were the first ones. And the same can be said about geomaxing and passport bros. The market out there, having observed and having talked to a lot of guys who actually experienced this stuff, is supremely oversaturated. When I was living in South Korea, about 2006 to 2008, it wasn't nearly as oversaturated as it is now. There was some saturation, not much. You go back even earlier. I remember being on a forum for expats in South Korea. And there were guys there since the late 90s, early 2000s, and there was almost no saturation at that point. You fast forward to 2023, so many people are doing this. So that means if you're trying to do what people did 20 years ago now, you're up against some stiff competition. And what happens? The women react to the competition. They get used to it. It's not special anymore. Even if you are decent looking, white, tall, whatever, it's still increasingly become run-of-the-mill as opposed to something exotic, which it would have been 15, 20 years ago. So geomaxing is increasingly an oversaturated market. Women are women. But the most important point I want to make in this video is more a point about globalization and the phenomenon, or rather the fact that countries are becoming more and more alike over time. Yes, there are still many distinctions. Yes, there are differences. I'm not claiming otherwise. But if you observe and talk to people, one of my favorite activities is actually conversing with people from other countries. Always enjoy the experience. And as you know, I have an interest in foreign languages, so that adds to it a bit. And in any event, I talk to people and I learn, oh wow, it's like this in this country. Oh, it's not quite the way I thought. It's quite similar to, say, the West. And many people don't realize that. So I want to read a comment that I received on an older video I made about a year ago, the problem of geomaxing. It's made by a Brazilian gentleman. Now, Brazil is an interesting country. It's one of the more popular destinations for certain types of geomaxers, although arguably Southeast Asia is more popular, but still Brazil is pretty popular. And I've never been there, and the only thing I know a lot about when it comes to Brazil would be the ecology of the Amazon rainforest and the fauna there. But I have talked to a lot of men over the past 10 years from Brazil. And it's just one example of a country that to a geomax or a passport bro from the United States, Canada, maybe the UK, is presented as the promised land. This place where women are women, women are feminine, and men are men, and men are masculine. But perceptive Brazilian men, the ones I've talked to over the years, really have a different view. So somebody left a comment not too long ago on this older video, a Brazilian, and I want to read it off to you. Here's the quote. "You have no idea how terrible the anti-male laws are here. It's actually imported from the US. However, in Brazil, there's a saying that everything you plant grows, and it grows with carnivore mutations. Laws may be a copy of the US laws, but ours are much, much worse. Here a girl can say you abused her with no evidence whatsoever. You go to jail as a preemptive measure while you wait for due process. Then you get R'd in jail. There's this culture in Brazil that every R'ist is R'd by other prisoners multiple times. Then you get HIV/AIDS from the prisoners. After that, you go through a trial to prove you're innocent. The man is guilty until proven otherwise. If you prove you're innocent, nothing happens to the girl who lied, and you have to live with AIDS for the rest of your life. If you are famous and rich, there may be more careful examination before they send you to prison, but your life is destroyed anyway." Now, much of this seems like hyperbole and exaggeration. You should probably take it with a grain of salt. However, much of the statements he's making seem to be corroborated by guys I've talked to from Brazil, smart guys from Brazil, who are far more critical of the culture than most people typically think. And I've heard similar things, not to this degree, from these guys, that the laws are not too dissimilar in Brazil than they are in the United States. And I've also heard similar things from other Latin Americans. And whether or not this is ultimately caused by American culture or some other phenomenon, globalization will see to it that wherever you go, you're going to end up in a very similar situation over time. Remember what I said about YouTube? YouTube is the most formulaic it's ever been in mid-late 2023 because the more time passes, the more oversaturated things become. The same with geomaxing and the same with globalization. I still have a few contacts in South Korea, and let me tell you, it is completely different from what it was almost 20 years ago when I was there. Why? Globalization. Where you are going will matter less and less with time. And there won't be a spot on the earth eventually that you can go to find your salvation, if that's what you're looking for, in the bosom of a woman. Not that you could ever find salvation in the bosom of a woman anyway, but the opportunities are getting more and more limited. And the combination of these multiple factors, women being women universally, regardless of where they are, where they grow up, where they live, the oversaturation factor of just so many guys doing it, going out there, heading out there, and just globalization, the cultural adoption of institutions, laws, practices, mores that are similar to the West. That's what's been happening now for decades in general, broadly speaking. And there will still be distinctions, but a lot of it won't be different. And so you now have, as a guy trying to geomax to do your passport bro thing, a panoply of obstacles that are going to either prevent you wholesale from doing it or are really, really, really going to stand in your way. Consider that women are women. The fact that if you're going to be geomaxing, in all likelihood, you are going to be a wallet to her. You have to accept that you are going to be basically beta bucks, oofy doofy, however you want to term it. You're going to be a wallet to the woman in question and nothing more. You're going to have the steep competition from other guys. And then on top of that, you have possibly laws that you're not familiar with because A, you're not from the country, B, you don't speak the language. That's something I brought up multiple times. You need to learn the language if you're going to live in the country. Otherwise, you are going to get screwed royally. So you don't know the language, you don't know the laws. You say something, and all of a sudden, you're in big trouble. Whether the laws emulate the laws in the US, Canada, or not, there are going to be things you're not familiar with. There are going to be things that could be punitive that you're not familiar with. And as much as they do emulate the laws in the West, say the United States, then you're doubly screwed. So I'm not sure if quote-unquote geomaxing in the traditional sense, say the 15, 20 year ago sense, even makes sense anymore. I would say if you're just out there to have a good time, pay some bar prostitutes or whatever, yeah, that's fine. And it's a very clear and naked, no pun intended, transaction. But if you're looking for love, well, for one thing, you're probably not going to be on this channel, because why on earth would you think that way after all you've learned about human psychology and male-female psychology? But yeah, you're probably not going to find that stuff anymore. Where are people going to go next? War zones? You're going to go to Mogadishu, Somalia to find the love of your life? Because, again, the places you can go, they're narrowing, they're getting fewer and fewer, and you need to be on the lookout for that sort of thing. Regardless, if you're going to geomax, you need to know that you will be a wallet tour and probably nothing more. You don't share a language, you don't share a culture, you don't share really anything. So the only thing you can entice her with is going to be your wallet. Because let's be honest, if you are a very attractive and popular guy in, say, the United States or the UK, it's unlikely you would have left the country in the first place to go and geomax to find your fortune. So yeah, be prepared to be a wallet and be prepared to deal with all the stuff that I've mentioned. There is increasingly no place left on Earth that is safe, and that's just something you're going to have to learn to accept one way or another. As always, thank you for tuning in. Special thanks to my patrons and donors on PayPal. You guys are the best. You keep the channel going. And if you engage in the usual YouTube jazz of liking the video, sharing the video, commenting, subbing if you're not yet a sub, be much appreciated. My channel does not get the traffic it ought to based on sub count at least. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out next time. Until then, may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye for now. Take care. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.